Hello, this is a pre-recorded video for module 223, which is about the cells. So again, this spacing will be for week 3 to 4. We are now on week 3. Today is October 20. And unfortunately, our first video was accidentally deleted. So I apologize for that. Yeah, let's start. So, without further ado, this is our objectives. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to differentiate prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell structure, identify and enumerate cell structure and its functions, apply the basic principles of chemistry in the transport mechanism of cells. And then we also have our learning guide questions. So I think we have 9 learning guide questions. So this guide questions, it will help you, it will guide you throughout the lesson. So you can write this down on a paper and then throughout the lesson while I'm discussing, you can answer it. Or you can always go back after the module and then you should be able to answer this 9. So I won't be enumerating all of this. Okay, let's start with the first chapter, which is overview of the cell. Let's talk about meaning and classification. So it says here that cell means a small room or chamber. So whenever we go to a place like jail, no, sa presinto, you would have this small cells. Ang tawag nila is cell. Like, di ba, merong miracle in cell number 7. So, yeah. So, it means a small room or chamber. So, cells, they could extract nutrients from the environment, chemically converting these nutrients into sources of energy or to complex molecules. So it can also control catalysis and carry out cellular respiration. And of course, the most basic unit of life, ang pinakang foundation or meaning ng cells is this. Sabi rin niya, I am made up of proteins and organelles. My main function is to organize. I can form tissues and systems. So imagine for a human body, sabi dito, you have 37.2 trillion cells. That's a lot. So what more kung halimbawa sa isang blue whale or sa elephant, no? They have more kasi they have bigger composition. So we have a cell theory. This is also included in your readings. Number 1, all organisms are composed of one or more cells. So, hindi lang isa, no? Number 2, cells are the basic unit of structure and functions of organisms. Number 3, all cells come only from other cells. Yeah. So, sabi dito, we have a picture. I got this from the internet. Sabi, guys, we're in the liver. Sabi naman nung isa, so what must we do? Sabi nung isang cell, let's check the book. So kasi iba't ibang system, they have their own cellular function. Okay, let's go to prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. So if you haven't watched the video that I've sent sa ating Google Classroom, you should be able to understand easily kasi doon merong animations yung video. So this one is a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. So as you can see from the picture, prokaryotic is much smaller than eukaryotic cells. Obvious naman. And then the meaning of prokaryotic, pro means before, karyon means nucleus. So before nucleus. And it says here, no nucleus and subcellular components. Eukaryotic, on the other hand, as you can see, it is much larger than prokaryotes. And it is a true nucleus. It has a nucleus and nuclear membrane. It has a variety of membrane-bound organelles. So kung mapapansin nyo, marami siyang organelles. So another picture, sabi ni prokaryotic. And here's where I'd put my nucleus. If I had one, kaso wala siya, no? So this is a simple lifestyle of the prokaryote na si Melvin pala yung pangalan. Okay? So this is my source, Amoeba Sisters. So here, ito yung summary ng ating prokaryotic versus eukaryotic. Again, to review, prokaryon before nucleus, eukaryon through nucleus. So ang prokaryotic natin is much smaller than eukaryotic. Malaki ang ating eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells doesn't have nucleus or subcellular components. Compared to eukaryotic, it has membrane-bound organelles. So if we look at this picture, we see kung anong mga organisms under each classification of cell, no? So for every organisms that is not bacteria, so anything na hindi bacteria, that is eukaryotic. We have animals, plants, fungus, protists. And then, sa prokaryotic natin, lahat ng bacterial cells such as eubacteria and archaebacteria. Ito din, another list of organisms under each classification. In this slide, you can see na sa taas, lahat ng to is included sa eukaryotes. Again, animals, plants, fungi, protists. And then sa prokaryotes are bacteria and archaea. Now let's look at the structure and functions of the prokaryotic cell. So we'll be discussing first prokaryotic before the eukaryotic. So these are mostly the bacteria, no? So this is the structure of a prokaryotic cell. Itong parang tail, they call it flagellum. And then the one in the center is the nucleoid circular DNA. So nandito yung kanyang genome, no? And then the capsule, which is the red one. Cell wall represented by the yellow. And then plasma membrane, the green. Blue, cytoplasm. So para siyang fluid-like. And then yung maliliit natin are ribosomes. And then we have the plasmid. And of course yung pilay natin or pilus. Pilus, yung mga parang tusok-tusok, no? So in a phylogenetic tree of life, yung purple natin and also the red ones, etong dalawa are included in a prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotes to lahat. Meanwhile, etong brown is the eukaryotes. No, you don't have to memorize this. I just want to show you kung ano yung mga organisms under both classification. So let's look at the genetics of a prokaryote. Tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, nucleoid, ito yung where the DNA is located. So usually it is singular circular chromosome. So ito yung ating nucleoid. Okay? So next is plasmid. It's a small extra piece of chromosome or genetic material. So kung mapapansin nyo yung plasmid natin are the ones that are floating around the cytoplasm. So this is not critical to everyday functions. However, it can provide genetic information to promote antibiotic resistance, virulence factors, and promote conjugation. So when we say antibiotic resistance, no? Di ba pag umiinom tayo ng antibiotics, so ito yung nagre-resist. Maraming mga bacterial cells, prokaryotic cells that are resistant sa antibiotic, no? So hindi lahat namamatay just because uminom ka ng antibiotic. So meron din tayong conjugation na tinatawag which is the one picture that we can see here. So let's see if I can zoom this. Okay, great. So ito yung explain ko lang yung sa conjugation. This actually shows kung paano nagre-replicate, no? Replication ng isang bacteria. So if you can see, this whole thing is a one prokaryotic cell or bacterial cell. So inside, it has the chromosomal DNA and it has the plasmid, so the one that is floating. So dito naman sa replication, you always have a donor and you have a recipient. So when we say recipient, it's the one that is receiving. And then, meron tayong pilus. So yung pilus natin, ito yung mga yan, no? Okay. So, yung ating pilus magko-connect dun sa pilus of the other bacterial cell. And then, look what happens here. So, nagkakaroon ng replication between the plasmid here and then magta-transfer siya dito sa kabilang bacterial cell. What happens is that magkakaroon sila ng parehas ng plasmid. So, kaya ang bilis mag-multiply ng bacteria, it's because of their pilus, yung mga strokes, no? Para siyang mga tinik outside. Okay? Let me bring this back, picture. So, from old donor, ngayon meron na tayong new donor, and then so on, magre-replicate siya, etc. Okay, next. Next. Okay, so we have the cytoplasm, the one fluid-like, yung blue natin. It's also known as protoplasm. So this contains all cell structure, waste, nutrients, enzymes, etc. So everything is almost floating around here. So it is a location of growth, metabolism, and replication. And this one, granules, if we look at this picture down here, so this is under the microscope, makikita nyo yung mga small bubble-like structures or the granules. It's the bacteria's way of storing nutrients. So again, remember this. It might be part of the exam. So next is a cytoskeleton. So if you see here, this is a building. This is not a cell. When we say cytoskeleton, it's the scaffolding. So, kung mapapansin nyo, yung mga grids na yan, yung mga bakal na yan, it's what we call scaffolding. It's the one that keeps the cell in shape. So, before, there is a discovery of cytoskeleton only in eukaryotic cell. So, before, hindi nila alam if there is a cytoskeleton in a prokaryotic cell. So, this is a major advance in cell biology. So next, we have ribosomes, which are found within cytoplasm. So again nga, if we go back, cytoplasm, it's located here, and sabi dito, contains almost all of the cell structures. Kasama na doon yung ating ribosomes, which is made of protein and rRNA. So ito, ribosomal RNA. Next is the plasma membrane. So this separates the cell from its environment. So this is the plasma membrane, the one represented in green. We also have the cell wall, which is represented by the yellow one. It's a rigid support but freely permeable to solutes. When we say permeable, it means that almost any substance can go in or out of the cell. So dito sa cell wall, it could be gram-positive or gram-negative. Hopefully, you'll be able to encounter these terminologies when you go to your microbiology. So this cell wall, it's very significant for a prokaryotic kasi it is not present in eukaryotic cell of humans. So remember that na ang eukaryotic cell of animals doesn't have cell wall. Ito yung sinasabi ko, a gram-positive or gram-negative. So this is a gram-positive under a microscope. This is gram-negative. And then if we look at its structure close up, so let's look at this black and white picture on your right. So this one, kung mapapansin nyo, itong gram-positive, which is the one on your left, it has a very thick peptidoglycan comparing to a gram-negative, which is only around 10%, 10 to 15%. Dito, almost 90% is peptidoglycan. So, ganun din dito, if we look at here, the purple is represented by peptidoglycan. And then, on a gram-negative cell wall, ito lang yung peptidoglycan. So again, if we look here, gram-negative, meron siyang outer membrane, no? If we look here, merong outer membrane. Ito yung outer membrane ng gram-negative, peptidoglycan, and other layers. Dito naman sa gram-positive, yung peptidoglycan, which is the blue, represented by blue, is makapal. So it is significant for sa drugs nga, like sa gamot, no? Mga gamot. Okay, now let's look at examples. We're moving on to examples of prokaryotes, the ones with prokaryotic cells. So, given the example in an everyday life, we would see endospores. So, endospores are commonly found in soil and water. So, they may survive for a very long periods of time. Why? It is resistant to radiation, desiccation, lysozyme, temperature, starvation, and chemical disinfectants. So lysozyme, you will be able to discover the meaning of lysozyme or description niya, function ng lysozyme later on. So lysozyme is like it kills or destroys toxins. So dito, ang endospores, ito ay resistant siya to almost everything. That's why it survives for a very long periods of time. So ito ang isang microscopic stain ng bacterial smear of Bacillus subtilis showing endospores, yung green. So kung mapapansin nyo yung mga green dyan, it's represented as the endospores. And then yung mga red natin na color here are the vegetative cells. So next is Clostridium. So I'm sure you have heard of this bilang food technology students, no? So itong genus na to of Clostridium, it has what they call superpowers. So to make them particularly tough pathogens. So they are known to produce a variety of toxins, some of which are fatal. So, ang toxins natin, itong keyword na toxins, it's the one that is secreted by bacteria, no? Or it is secreted by pathogens. So, we have Clostridium tetani, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, and Clostridium difficile. So, I'll be discussing din this one by one. So, let's look at Clostridium tetani. So, eto, di ba, naririnig nyo na yung tetano. So, mostly, it's on those metal, no? Present in the metal, yung mga ating, ano bang kalawang? Kalawang ba? Nangangalawang na pako, etc. So, it's an agent of tetanus. So, ano bang nangyayari pag may tetanus? Possible magkaroon ka ng paralysis. It affects the brain and nervous system. So, pag na-deposit siya dun sa wound, nagkakaroon ng neurotoxin which interferes with the nerves. So, you can look online kung ano nangyayari for someone na natetano, no? So, next is a Clostridium botulinum. This is very important in food safety. So bakit? Kasi it's an agent of botulism. So this prokaryotic bacteria, it's usually found in canned goods na mababa yung acid. So kung mapapansin niyo sa picture, usually this is affected sa mga canned fruits. So pag yun sa loob, kung mapapansin niyo, 'di ba, sa fruit cocktail, meron liquid sa loob. Pag bumaba yung acid sa loob ng ating cans, possible there is uh, multiplication of Clostridium botulinum, because we all know that acid can prolong food, no? It can preserve food. However, pag bumaba na yung acid sa ating canned goods, there is a possible multiplication of Clostridium botulinum, which could be very fatal to life when ingested. And just a fun fact, yung some Clostridium botulinum are used in Botox. So, alam niyo naman yung Botox, di ba? Pampawala ng wrinkles. But, yung substance na tinuturok sa ating Botox are safe na siya sa skin ng tao, no? So, nagpo-produce siya ng oxygen para mababanat yon. So, imagine how much bulging it can do. What more kung sa skin ng tao, no? So, as long as it is not ingested. Next is Clostridium perfringens. So, this is one of the agents of gas gangrene and food poisoning. So, what is gangrene? So, ito yung sugat na parang hindi na gumagaling, no? This is very common by the time ng World War II, kasi if you have watched Wonder Woman and other war movies, meron sila usually trenches. So yung trenches is yung hukay na malalim na kasya yung tao. So doon nagtatago yung mga mga soldiers by the time sa front line ng war. And then doon kasi pag umulan, so lupa yon, nag-i-stay yung water, nagsisip through the soil, and then possible na merong mga iba din, like sabi dito, from soil and areas contaminated by human or animal feces. So hindi naman maiwasan siguro na may doon na sila dumudumi, etc. Doon sila, may mga hayop na doon din dumudumi. So halo-halo na siya na iba't ibang contamination, no? So, ito yung nangyayari sa wound which is infected by Clostridium perfringens. So, next we have Clostridium difficile. So, it is an agent of diarrhea or inflammation of the colon. So, colitis. So, this is an example. So, sa loob to ng colon. So, ang ating Clostridium difficile, it is a natural part of an intestinal flora. But resistant strains can proliferate and cause pseudomembranous colitis, no? So, yan yung nangyayari, and na-inflame siya. So, kita nyo naman, no? Okay, so if we think about it, are prokaryotes good or bad? So what do you guys think about this question? Kasi um, most of the prokaryotic cells that I've discussed are mostly bad. So if we think about it, so based on your answers, prokaryotes are good. So some are good, such as, di ba nga, may mga bacteria tayo that are used in fermentation. We also have bacteria that are used for cheese and for other food processing for it to prolong life or prolong its shelf life, such as Yakult, no, Lactobacillus. So yeah. So not all prokaryotic cells are bad. We also have some good bacteria then. Okay? So now we move on to our eukaryotic cell. So we are now familiar with a prokaryotic. So again, prokaryotic doesn't have a nucleus, wala siyang membrane-bound organelles. So now we talk about eukaryotic cell, which is much, much larger than a prokaryotic cell. So let's have a recap. Ito din yung sinabi ko kanina. It's a true nucleus. It has much larger than prokaryotes. It has a nucleus and nuclear membrane-bound organelles. Ito yung mga organisms that has eukaryotic cell, which is animals, plants, protists, and fungus. Organelles, kanina pa ako nagme-mention organelles, it is a specialized structure within the cells. So, nasa loob siya ng cells. So, little organs. And it performs specific functions. So these are the main types of a eukaryotic cell. We have the animal cell, which is on your left, and then a plant cell, which is on your right, the green one, no? So we'll be focusing mainly on a animal cell. So if we look closely, we have this nucleus nasa gitna. We have this one is the endoplasmic reticulum. We also have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So merong dalawa na ER, which is rough and the smooth. We also have the mitochondria here. We have the ribosomes attached to the ER. Cytoplasm represented by the yellow color. We have Golgi apparatus, so next to the ER. And we also have different vesicles. And we have lysosome here outside. Yeah. And we have cilia and microvilli. No? So parang sila yung swimming agents ng ating animal cell. So we have major components, three major components of a eukaryotic cell. We have the cell membrane. So ito yon, no? The one that encloses the eukaryotic cell. Plasma membrane. We have the cytoplasm, the one that's inside. It houses all the organelles. And of course, we have the nucleus. So let's start with a cell membrane. So look at this picture. Cell membrane is the one that encloses the cell. Okay? So dito makikita nyo, this is just the close-up look of a cell membrane. It is enclosed by a phospholipid bilayer, no? Phospholipid. So meaning meron siyang hydrophobic tail and a hydrophilic end, no? And first, we have the cell membrane. It acts as a barrier and transport molecules in and out of the cell since sila nga yung parang guard, no, of the cell. And it also acts as receptors for hormones and neurotransmitters. Okay, next is the cytoplasm. So the one that's inside. So cytoplasm is a living material surrounding the nucleus. It helps remove waste material and houses all the organelles. No? So ito yon. So if we look at a cell as a house, or sorry, as like a huge village, yung ating cytoplasm is the one that houses all the organelles. So next is nucleus, very important. So nucleus contains the genetic material of the cell, which is DNA. And it is also the site of RNA synthesis and the site of ribosomal subunit assembly. So if we look at this picture, I put here everyone, no? Lahat sila parang nag-uusap-usap. Nasa nucleus sila, they're having a meeting, they're planning ano bang role ang gagawin natin, etc., etc. So these are the other important organelles that we will be discussing. Let's start with ER, which is endoplasmic reticulum. It forms a link between the nucleus and the cell membrane. So, in here, dito nag-a-attach yung ribosomes. So, rough ER, sa rough ER natin, or granular ER. So, merong dalawang um, classes ng ER, which is the rough ER. This is where most of the ribosomes are attached, which means dito rin nagkakaroon ng biosynthesis of protein. So again nga, yung ribosomes natin is the site of protein synthesis. So this is the rough ER, also called as granular ER. As you can see naman, no, kaya siya granular or rough kasi dyan naka-attach lahat ng ribosomes. And of course, we also have the smooth ER, which metabolizes certain drugs, detoxifies certain drugs, toxic compounds, and carcinogens. So dito sa smooth ER, parang pinaka-function niya is by toxicity. So ayaw niya sa any toxic compounds. So dito naman, protein synthesis. Next is the Golgi apparatus. So Golgi apparatus is the one that connects the ER. So from nucleus to the ER and then to the Golgi apparatus. So it is present in all cells except in red blood cells. Its main function is the packaging center. So dito, minomodify niya yung protein coming from the ER and then to Golgi, siya yung magpapackage. So parang kumbaga parang siya yung courier, no? By addition of carbohydrates, lipid, etc. So it is functions niya, synthesis of intracellular organelles such as lysosomes and peroxisomes. So aside from packaging, as we look here, ang other functions niya is to produce lysosome and peroxisome. So dito, let's just go back before I discuss lysosome and peroxisome. Again, from the nucleus, dito parang this is where the DNA is located, ang pinakang brain of the cell. So dito nagmi-meeting and then sila pag-uusapan nila, okay, ano bang gagawin natin? And then we go to rough ER, which is where the ribosomes are attached, and meaning dito nagkakaroon ng protein synthesis. We also have the smooth ER, which functions as the one that detoxifies or removes, metabolizes drugs and other compounds that are not what the cell wants, so by toxicity. And then from here, they will process, so dalawa ang functions ng Golgi natin, no? From rough ER, lahat ng protein ipapackage, so packaging center ng Golgi apparatus, and then it produces lysosome and peroxisome, which is the one that are responsible for the toxic compounds. So here, we have the lysosomes, no? Yan yung mga yan, maliliit. It is formed from Golgi apparatus. It contains the enzyme, lysozyme, around 40 enzymes. It acts as a digestion center and destruction center. So lysozymes digest proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids. It is the one that is responsible for destruction of bacteria and other foreign bodies coming from smooth ER again, removal of excessive secretory products, and removal of unwanted cells in embryo. Next is the peroxisome. So again, this is synthesized by the Golgi apparatus. It contains the enzyme peroxidases. So madali namang tandaan, no? So sa lysosome, it produces the enzyme lysozyme. Sa peroxisome, it produces the enzyme peroxidases and catalases. So this is for the metabolism of peroxides. So it is very important in carrying out beta oxidation ng fatty acids, which will be discussed later on sa topics natin on carbohydrate metabolism, no? So ito yung ating Krebs cycle. So again, just remember that peroxisomes are important in PCA or Krebs cycle, which is this one. Okay, let's move on to mitochondria. So we all know mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. So if you see in the exam, what is the powerhouse of the cell? You automatically should know that it is the mitochondria, no? And this converts energy to form ATP. So kaya nga siya tinawag powerhouse of the cell because it's the one that produces the energy. It's the one that converts energy para makabuo ng ATP, which is, do you know what ATP is? It is adenosine triphosphate. Okay? So meron siyang parts ang ating mitochondria. So we have the inner membrane, we have outer membrane, and of course, we have the matrix. So yung outer membrane natin, it is permeable for metabolites. Permeable, again, is a term that indicates that substances can go in and out of the organelle or the cell. We have inner membrane, which is responsible for oxidative phosphorylation, and ETC stands for electron transport chain. So this might also be part of the questions in the exam. And then, of course, ang mitochondrial matrix natin, ito yon. So dito nagaganap yung ating citric acid cycle, or you're also familiar with this as Krebs cycle or TCA cycle. We also have the beta oxidation of fatty acids and other degradative enzymes located in mitochondrial matrix. So what else do we have here? Mitochondria also contains DNA. So it also has its own DNA. And it is called mtDNA, short for mitochondrial DNA. So it encodes a few polypeptides and involved in oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so another picture just for icebreaker. So sabi dito, if organelles could talk, ito yung sasabihin nila. So nucleus, sabi, everyone do what I say. Kasi nga para siyang command center, no? And then sa ER natin, endoplasmic reticulum says, you guys, be quiet. I have so much work to do. Why? Because its main function is for protein synthesis. Okay? And then Golgi apparatus says, I need a break because it's the one that packages, no? Packaging center siya. What else ang function niya? It produces two, which is lysosome and peroxisome. Pinaka main function niya is to remove or metabolize, detoxify all the substances that the cell doesn't need. So sabi nga dito ni lysozyme, this guy, everything I touch, I destroy. So sabi naman ni vacuole, I feel quite fulfilled, no? So maybe because this is where nutrients are stored. And then mitochondria, sabi niya, no, ayaw niya. Kasi ayaw niyang tumigil to produce ATP, ayaw niyang tumigil to produce energy, very energetic ang mitochondria. Okay? So just for a fun fact about sperm cells, so sabi dito, sperm cells do not contribute mitochondria to the fertilized egg, so that yung mitochondrial DNA, it is inherited exclusively through the female line. So thus, mitochondria are maternally inherited, no? Okay, now for our chapter 4, which is mechanism of transport. So in this chapter, we will be discussing on how cells interact with its environment. So we talk about cellular environment. So iba-iba nga, di ba, according to cell theory, basic foundation of life ang ating cells. And we know that there are variations in concentration of specific components in different cell types and organelles. So we know na iba't ibang function ng cells, iba-iba rin yung environment nila. It says here that composition varies due to cells surrounding because dito nagde-depend ang cell sa environment niya for the nutrients required for replacement of components for growth and energy needs. So, question. So, what substance is one of the components in the environment and is required for the cell's existence? Of course, the answer should be water, no? So, sabi nga, water is a universal solvent, no? Water as a solvent has a polar nature. So, we discussed polarity back in organic chemistry and also qualitative chemistry, and it has the ability to form hydrogen bonds that are the basis for its unique solvent properties, no? And this is an example of how hydrogen bonds are formed. So this is just a review. Sabi nga, it has the ability to form hydrogen bonds. So, ito yung kanyang unique property. So, if you remember hydrogen bonding, we have electronegativity, itong parang infinity sign. So, we have the positive attracted to the negative side kasi mas electronegative tong side na to. Sorry, itong side na to. Oxygen attracted to the charge ng ating hydrogen, no? So, yeah. Okay, water is one of the components of the environment. So, if you see here sa ating picture, this is a cell. And look inside, we have the water molecules. And then we have water molecules outside your cells. So again, it is both present inside your cell, intracellular, and outside your cell, which is extracellular. It is required for the cell's existence. So let me take a break here. Okay, excuse me. So water and its polar nature. So if you remember one of our experiments in qualitative chemistry, under solutions, no? We dissolved salt in water, which is our solvent, no? Salt is our solute and then water is our solvent. Salts are held together by attraction of positive and negative groups of dissolved in water because of its electrostatic force. So for example, yun nga again, salt which is composed of NaCl, both are with ionic charges. They are attracted to charges in H2O molecules. Again, meron ulit to na electronegativity, no? Itong dalawa. Okay? So this next slides will be about cell transport. So how does cells gets its nutrients from its environment, or how does one cell release its energy or release molecules from inside to the outside and vice versa? So cell transport is the movement of substances across the membrane. So across the membrane is meaning in and out of the cell. So just imagine cell transport as a car, no? Movement is either into or out of the cell. Sometimes there should be substances here. Substances just move through the phospholipid bilayer. So again nga yung phospholipid bilayer, it is present in the cell membrane. And sometimes substances need assistance of biomolecules such as protein. So we'll be talking about more this in the next slides. So before I proceed to that, let's talk about cell membrane anatomy. So again, I already told you about this earlier, about the cell membrane. So ito yung zoom picture niya. And ito yung parang another picture, three-dimensional. So ito yung sinasabi, sometimes it's just substances just move through the phospholipid bilayer. So minsan dire-diretso lang yung substances in and out of the cell. And sometimes naman, it needs assistance of biomolecules such as protein. So if we look here, so we have protein here attached sa ating cell membrane, which is the one that assists molecules to go in and out of the cell. When we talk about cell transport, we should be thinking of this term, which is a semi-permeable. So, ang ating cell membrane, it is semi-permeable. When we say semi-permeable, it means it is selectively permeable. So, pag selective ka, ibig sabihin, di ba, parang choosy ang isang cell membrane. Meaning, it keeps some things in and lets some things out. So, hindi lahat ng gustong mag-enter through the cell membrane can go through. Minsan naman, yung mga gustong lumabas na substances outside of the cell, hindi rin naman pwede. No? So, it controls this feature, having selective permeable. It controls transport of materials depending sa cell's function. So, this is what I talked about phospholipid bilayer. Ito yung ating bilayer. We have a hydrophobic tail and a hydrophilic head. So when we say hydrophobic tail, water fearing, no? Phobic is phobia. Hydrophilic, which is water loving naman. So this bilayer limits the types of molecules that pass through it. So, large molecules such as sugars and proteins, masyado siyang malaki for it to pass through the phospholipid bilayer. That's why it was mentioned earlier na kailangan niya ng assistance of a protein carrier. So, ito yung tinatawag nating transport proteins. So, transport proteins acts as channels or pumps. So, ito yung ating channel protein, the one represented in green, to let in or force out certain molecules, katulad nga ng sugars and other proteins. So it protects the cell's internal environment. It also keeps balance of salts, nutrients, and proteins within range so that the cell will be kept alive. There are 4 ways. So you only have to remember 4 ways of molecule transport. Namely, we have simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, active transport, and vesicle transport. So you can easily write this down on your paper and then we'll go through it. So we have SFVAV, simple, facilitated, active, and vesicle transport. So let's discuss first one, which is simple diffusion. It is a process by which solutes are moved along a concentration gradient in a solution. It requires no energy and it requires no assistance. So this includes passive transport and osmosis. So as you can see in this picture, if we look at this, so we have the particles here and the arrows going in, no? So basically, ito lang, the solutes are moving in or out of the concentration. Depende yung movement ng cell, no? So, without energy, without assistance. Next is facilitated diffusion. So, this one, ganun din, particles move along a concentration. However, in facilitated diffusion, kailangan niya ng assistance of a transport protein. So maybe yung mga particles that are moving are larger compared to the ones that are moving in a simple diffusion, no? So kaya kailangan niya ng transport protein represented by the blue one. But this one does not require energy from cell. So again, same lang din as simple diffusion, walang energy needed input, wala ring assistance as long as it is moving in or out of the cell, no? So dire-diretso lang sila. So just a quick comparison. So simple diffusion, the solutes or the particles just passes through the gradient, passes through the plasma membrane without energy needed, without assistance needed. On the other side, facilitated diffusion, again, the particles are just going in the concentration gradient or the plasma membrane. However, with the presence of a carrier protein or transport protein, but there is no energy needed, no assistance needed from the cell. Now let's look at the third one. So in this case, active transport. So this one, it is the movement of molecules across a cell membrane from a lower concentration to a higher concentration against the concentration gradient. So if we look at the picture, active transport from low concentration, see how there's only two particles going to the higher concentration. So bakit kasi mas attracted sila dun sa charges, no? Kaya nangyayari yan. Low concentration to high concentration. And in this case, it requires cell for energy for it to pull in or pump out certain molecules or ions. So again, you just have to remember in active, di ba nga pag sinasabi when someone or something is active, energetic siya. So it needs energy represented by ATP, no? The yellow one. So next is vesicle transport. So in vesicle transport, earlier I mentioned you something about vesicle, no? Para siyang carrier, no? It is a transport of large molecules. So in this case, since hindi nga kaya ng isang membrane ng isang cell to transport large molecules, it needs something such as a bubble-like sac made from pieces of molecules called the vesicle, represented by this round illustration, no? So in this case, included ang exocytosis and endocytosis. So exocytosis, it is an active vesicle transport movement out of the cell. So as you can see in the arrow here, the molecule is going outside. So dito, kita nyo naman yung mga particles, kailangan niya ng vesicle, and then ang nare-release na lang outside, mag-a-attach ang ating vesicle to the membrane. Ang mare-release outside are the ones that are inside this vesicle, no? So exit. So easy lang naman siyang tandaan kasi exo, exit. Next is endocytosis, which is another active vesicle transport, movement into the cell or entering, no? So yung arrow natin, we look at this, there is a molecule from the outside and then going in of the cell means entering, no? Endo, enter. Okay, for our last before I move on to homeostasis, let's have a recap of the four ways of cellular transport. If you could enumerate along with me together. So first, we have simple diffusion. Second, we have active facilitated diffusion. So we have simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion. Another is we have the active transport, and then the last one is the vesicle transport. So if we're going to define all the four, simple diffusion, we have simple diffusion, it doesn't need energy. So yung concentration niya, it just goes through the plasma membrane. And then facilitated diffusion, Again, it just goes through the plasma membrane, but with the help of a carrier protein. And both of this doesn't need energy, both doesn't require any assistance. And then our third one is an active transport. So tinawag siyang active transport because it needs energy for it to pull in or push out any molecules in or out of the cell. And then our last is vesicle transport, which requires vesicle for the movement of the particles in or out of the cell, such as doing exocytosis and endocytosis. So for our last chapter, we have homeostasis. So what does homeostasis mean? So this one in the picture, as you can see, there's this woman with very hot food, no? Like, let's just say it's a soup. So sabi dito parang it looks like she doesn't want it kasi nga sobrang init. And then on the other hand naman, another soup, nagkaroon siya ng brain freeze because it's too cold. In the middle, you see the picture, she's a happy customer kasi she's found the balance or just the right temperature. So homeostasis means balance or equilibrium within the cell or a body. So it is an organism's ability to keep a constant internal environment. No? So sa homeostasis, we have this thing called homeostatic regulation. It actually means that you have to adjust the system within a cell. Adjusting of systems within the cell, it is referred to homeostatic regulation. And then, since nagkakaroon nga ng, there is constant change in internal and external environment, of course, adjustments have to be made continuously for the cell or for it to stay or near the normal proportions of all internal substances. So all concepts of transport discussed in this module plays an important role in homeostatic regulation. So that is my last slide. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, you can message me directly through my email or through my messenger. And now you can proceed, hopefully, with your worksheet number 2. So you can look at your Google Classroom and I will be uploading your worksheet number 2. This is very easy because you will be just looking at the cell organelles, and then you have to know the functions and you just write it down. And worksheet number 2 will be due next week until Thursday. Again, we have our hashtag worksheet Thursdays due on October 29, Thursday until 5 p.m. You can turn it in directly to Google Classroom, or you can email it directly to me, or you can just send it through Messenger. So we have that, and also you can advanced reading for module 4. We'll be discussing about carbohydrate, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So in the next week, which will be next following weeks, first week of November, we'll be starting carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And then we'll be meeting by next week for an online recitation or mini Q&A, mini question and answer, or maybe I'll post a quiz. So we'll just talk about that. So without further ado, I'll be closing this module. And good luck, happy reading, and just let me know if you have any questions, okay?